look at our business, it's best described as an aggregation of services that customers need for their travel-related needs and demands. So finally, unless you get a better sense of what the customer is like in terms of their demography, in terms of their specific income, needs, interests, etc., and most importantly, be able to touch them or reach them at the right point or in time when they're more likely to be receptive, I think that's the fundamental of the business, right? So very often it's about getting people to start thinking about their vacation or holiday needs at the right time, because otherwise the risk is that they will start doing it last minute. And given the nature of our business, we are trying to get people to plan a vacation early so that you're able to book things in time to get them the best rates, to get visas in time, which is always and increasingly becoming a challenge. It's actually better to get them to start thinking about it earlier. So in many ways, analyzing data, being able to build the right kind of profile, reach the right set of people at the right time is crucial to actually being able to create the demand that's integral to us being able to sell finally. Technology is absolutely becoming the bedrock of pretty much every business, and probably service businesses more than others, because the customer of today is becoming so impatient, already impatient and getting more and more impatient. The speed at which they expect services, even if they are, as I first described, our business being an integration of services, their sort of patience is getting shorter and shorter. So when they come and inquire or want to make a purchase, their expectation of what time the delivery or quote, for example, can take is actually getting shorter and shorter. So as a result of this, everything has had to depend on technology to be able to deliver A, information, and B, the ability to actually be able to deliver the service in the form of a receipt, a confirmation, a voucher, or so on and so forth. So the systems and organizations per se like us that serve these customers have automatically had to speed up and therefore rely more and more on technology and data-driven analytics to be able to provide those services in line with an increasingly short patience customer. I think that's really, in many sense, a customer-driven phenomenon that I don't think is going to go away. It's only going to get more demanding. And each sort of big jump in technology that one player adopts sets the standards then for everybody else to adopt, because the expectation then is around that benchmark. So I think organizations like us have obviously had to, and being as large as we are, we've had to drive the change as well. So obviously internally, move processes that were largely manual to largely, technology automated. Besides, of course, the benefits other than time of productivity, of cost efficiency, and so on and so forth. So obviously there are both B2C advantages, being driven by the customer in many ways as a phenomenon, and the B2B advantages itself of technology becoming a sort of way to facilitate faster, more efficient, probably even more effective delivery of products and services. And again, I go back to the fundamental thing of product versus service. Service, by very nature, can only be experienced, and therefore it is in some sense a post facto realization. A product, to some extent, you can look at the features, the manufacturer is reputed, etc. You're looking at a price value proposition. It's fairly apparent even before you consume it. You can read about it, for example, on a website. But service, such as ours, is largely really referenced from experience. Now, short of you paying for it and experiencing it and then deciding whether you like it or not, the closest you can get to that is to get a reference point from somebody else who has experienced. So advocacy is absolutely critical in services businesses. And ours are a high ticket, highly considered, highly involved category, right, for a vacation or a holiday, typically an overseas vacation. So I think advocacy is supremely important. The rates of advocacy impact on a group or a set of friends or relatives would probably be anywhere between 5 and 6 times that of a point of reference that the manufacturer or provider is offering. Let me give you an example. The core business for us is still group travel in terms of volume, right, where people are traveling in groups and obviously get the economies of scale in terms of travel accommodation, and they do a fixed schedule, departure, itinerary, and so on and so forth. That was historically the biggest part of the business. It still is. But what is catching on is what we call ad hoc groups. That are groups that are being formed by friends, family, extended family and so on. And this is really about maybe one or two drivers of the idea of traveling together, reaching out to that friends and family circle and getting them on board to sort of do a trip together. Now, this is really fueled by advocacy, because that one or two promoters of that original idea of saying, okay, let's all spend Diwali in Thailand, for example, is about really either one friend in a group of friends or one family member actually starting the idea, advocating it with that group, getting them all on board, fighting, I can't come, I'm not sure, which typically happens in either friends or family, getting them all enthused, then doing the homework, reaching out to people, getting quotes, getting sometimes passports and all that organized as a group, coordinating that entire piece and actually traveling, leading that initiative. So advocacy is not just from the point of generating demand, but in many cases, even about fueling the supply. One is at a process level. I also look after service quality and customer service, and ORM as well, which is online reputation management. So in many ways, thanks to social media, as we referenced in our last question, it's becoming very easy for customers to give feedback real time. And when I say real time, it's like somebody's on tour and not able to see a particular sightseeing, or it's not up to their expectation. They're posting and I'm seeing it real time, right? It might be midnight in India, but you effectively can see it right now. What's happening therefore is that is in turn giving you an opportunity to listen far more efficiently and be able to address the problem on the ground. In many ways, we welcome technology and social media and customers. It's a double-edged sword, I admit it, because sometimes it's far easier to sort of put the company on defensive if many people together attack it on social media. But I think if you were to look at it constructively as we do, it's the most efficient way of customer service, because it's faster, it's direct, it's most efficient. The second part is because of this ability to listen to customer feedback easier, and B, because we do things like mystery calling and stuff like that, we are also getting a formal structure of feedback. So you get formal feedback on the process, on gaps, you're doing audits of the process and so on and so forth. So in many ways, there is a formal structure to give you real-time listening ability, and you're also doing direct from the customer, almost word of mouth in some sense, feedback, which can be good and as well, because very often we get social postings of what a great trip they had, pictures of it. I think technology, to the very vein of this conversation, I think is enabling more real-time, more efficient, more proactive in some sense platforms for us to be able to get the information and deal with it in terms of providing better services. The most passionate critiques, if handled well, are your most passionate champions, because they're passionate. The root is they're passionate. If they're uninterested, if they're neutral, it's actually very tough, because then they will not give you feedback, but they're still disgruntled. What happens then is you've lost the customer, you don't know it because they haven't told you, and they're still telling other people don't travel with Thomas Cook. I would rather they were passionate, told you they were not happy with you, gave you an opportunity to fix it, were fair in your ability to offer something, accepted it, and went passionately back and said, I equally love you now. There's a famous quote by David Ogilvy which says that many people use data like a light post to lean on rather than light for direction. I think that's the biggest risk. In a world where there's too much data and too many people claiming to be able to give you more data, the risk of really it's gone from no data, some data, to too much data, and you don't know what data is relevant. The risk is also not just getting the right data, but also the right interpretation of the right data. And I think that's becoming very, very crucial. And I think that's really where the maturity of the marketer and the organization in many ways, in terms of A, looking at the right data regularly and consistently. You can't just look at it when it's convenient to. And B, being able to take the right calls and be willing to accept that you made the wrong call quickly and fix it. This is really becoming, if you will, the root cause analysis of success or failure, in my opinion. Because either there's the risk of saying, listen, there's so much data being thrown at me, I really don't know what to respond to, because by the time I respond to it, there's new data anyway. Or the other option is to say, okay, I've got this data and it's telling me pure data driven, you should be doing this. Very often you have to factor in a lot of other things, right? Because if you were to go by pure data, this company, for example, would probably lose what it's built over 140 years, which is we have built a very efficient hybrid solution for aggregating travel services, which is that we're equally online, offline, and everything in between. Now, if you were to go with pure data, and depending on vested interest of the sources of data, you would argue that, listen, you should be just junking the brick business. You should just be putting everything online. But guess what? If you actually were to look at it, and at the risk of criticizing some of our competitors, there's very little money to be made increasingly in the pure online businesses because they're selling tickets and it's only top line. So in many ways, your core competence, you have to evaluate what you're good at, you have to evaluate where the value proposition really comes, and look at the data and that filter and say, okay, what are these data points can I use to either build a case, support a case, or make the right decisions in terms of investment and processes to be able to offer better products or services and be more profitable. Sometimes I think too much data can intimidate. You have to be fairly pragmatic and clear about what data matters and be willing to look at data fairly long term, because the other risk is very knee-jerk reactions. This month there's a sort of surge in something, so you make a fairly high impact investment on the basis of 1 month, and then you find out that that was an aberration. Next month it goes back. It's too late, the money's been spent, and the thing about money is once you spend it, you can't get it back. So you have to be sort of willing to say, okay, listen, is it consistent? Is there what's a trend versus what's an aberration?